Your position is no longer essential. The words hit me like a brick. Austin Kellerman sat there with that fake smile he'd been practicing for investor meetings. Behind him, Patricia from HR looked like someone was holding a gun to her head. The whole room smelled like vanilla air freshener and bullshit. I'm Chuck Fitzgerald, 48 years old. I'd been keeping Alpine Defense Systems legal for 22 years, but apparently I wasn't essential anymore. I didn't argue. Just set my security badge on the table and slid the folder across the glass. Let them think they were in control. Austin started his speech about my years of service and how the company was shifting priorities. Corporate talk for some consultant told me you cost too much money. I nodded along, being polite. Let the man dig his own grave. He thought he was cutting dead weight. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just another employee. I was the foundation. The named security officer, the guy whose federal clearance kept this whole operation running. Without my signature, they couldn't touch a single classified contract. But sure, Austin, let's call it restructuring. On the outside, I stayed calm, professional, the quiet Air Force vet who never made waves. But inside, I felt that click when you finally see the whole chessboard. I knew exactly how screwed they were about to be. Here's what these MBA types never get about defense contracts. You can't just fire the guy with the keys and expect everything to keep working. There are federal rules, real ones. While they spent their time impressing investors with PowerPoint slides, I was the one handling all the compliance paperwork, keeping our federal contacts happy, making sure we didn't lose our multi-million-dollar contracts. They walked me out like I might steal office supplies. I signed the exit papers, smiled at the intern who wouldn't look at me, and left without any drama. But before they locked me out of the system, I sent one last email from my personal laptop. Subject line, Clearance Oversight Termination Update. I copied the right federal agencies, included when my job ended. Attached Form SF-328, hit send and closed the laptop. They thought that was it. Game over. What they didn't realize was that paperwork doesn't care about their feelings. That one form just killed their defense authorization. Every classified contract they'd worked on since Thursday afternoon, now it was all illegal. But hey, what do I know? I'm just the guy they fired. I drove home and made coffee, sat by the window with my dog. I wasn't angry or excited, just calm. You know that feeling when you see a storm coming and you're not the one who's going to get wet? That's exactly how I felt. They wanted a leaner company. They were about to find out what lean really meant. By the time I got home, HR was already freaking out. You could tell from the email timestamps. 3:04 p.m., 3:07 p.m., 3:08 p.m., each one marked urgent. They were trying to fix something they didn't even understand yet. My computer access got cut at 3:12 p.m. By 3:20 p.m., the building security system was treating me like a threat. Pretty funny, considering I'd spent a decade protecting them from real threats. I sat in my truck checking my phone. One new email from a DoD address. No drama, just 7 words. Update received. Subject facility clearance reevaluation. That's when I knew the hammer was about to fall. You'd think I'd feel great about it, but honestly, I felt sad. Like watching someone drive straight into a wall when you tried to warn them. I actually liked my job. I was good at it. I knew every rule, every form, every person I'd kept out of federal prison with the right paperwork at the right time. I wasn't the star of the show. I was the foundation. And foundations only get noticed when they're gone, and everything starts falling down. I drove home slow, listening to the radio talk about football and traffic. But I kept thinking about that folder they'd left on the conference table. Form SF-328, do not shred, written in Sharpie. I'd filled it out a week ago and left it right where they could see it. Patricia had glanced at it during the meeting, then pushed it aside like junk mail. She had no idea that form wasn't optional. It was everything. See, once I filed that termination update and didn't name someone to take my place within 24 hours, their facility clearance didn't just freeze. It disappeared. All their contracts went cold, their classified communications got flagged, and the company couldn't legally touch any of the secret data they'd had access to 15 minutes earlier. But I'm sure Landon from the MBA program would figure it out. After all, he'd shadowed me for half a day back in April. The guy they brought in to replace me had already sent his excited to join the team message on Slack before he even got approved for anything. I'd looked him up on LinkedIn. Compliance enthusiast. No clearances, no experience with classified work, but he had that eager young face and a TED talk about digital transformation. Good luck with Form DD-254, buddy. By evening, I was on my couch with a beer, my dog next to me, and an email from Monica Sullivan blinking on my screen. "Are you okay?" she'd written. Monica always heard things first. I didn't reply yet. It wasn't my turn to do anything anymore. Time to let the system work exactly like it was supposed to. Let Austin find out that federal law doesn't care about his synergy and shareholder value. The company thought I was just a name on their org chart. They were about to learn I was the signature that kept them in business. By Friday morning, Austin was strutting around like he'd just saved the company. The all-hands meeting was mandatory, which meant half the staff showed up looking miserable with their coffee, and the other half dialed in with their cameras off, probably updating their resumes. I watched the replay later, curious to see how delusional he'd get. He started with the usual buzzwords: transformation, agility, vision, synergy. You could actually watch people's souls leaving their bodies with every slide. Then came the victory lap. "I'm proud to announce we've successfully restructured our compliance architecture," he said, pointing at an org chart that looked like someone had thrown spaghetti at a wall. "We've eliminated redundancy, consolidated oversight, and streamlined outdated processes." Translation: I fired everyone who told me no. Then he waved over some kid who looked like he'd just graduated college. "This is Landon Pierce. He's joining us as Interim Director of Regulatory Operations. Not compliance, not security. Regulatory operations. That's what you call someone when they're not qualified, but you still want them to sound important." Landon wore skinny pants and a navy blazer like he'd walked out of a startup poster. He grinned like he had no idea he was walking into a minefield. "I'm thrilled to be here. Let's make compliance awesome again." Someone in the back actually laughed into their coffee. Nobody clapped, but nobody said anything either. That's how guys like Austin stay in charge. They surround themselves with people who mistake LinkedIn posts for real qualifications. Austin clicked to the next slide. Big list of upcoming projects. At the bottom, finalizing submission for Project Falcon Ridge Q4. That got my attention real quick. Project Falcon Ridge wasn't just classified, it was high-level classified. The kind where you need an active facility security officer with serious clearance just to touch the paperwork. No shortcuts, no consultants, no, we'll figure it out later. And guess whose name was still on all those forms? Mine. Because those templates got created months ago when I was still running things, and nobody had bothered updating anything. They were just going to hit submit and hope for the best. I could picture some intern uploading everything to the secure network, having no clue that using my name without my current authorization was like setting off a federal alarm. Good luck with that, guys. Austin ended his show with some cheesy line about not clinging to the past and building the future. This time, people actually clapped. Or maybe that was just the sound effects. Back in my living room, I poured more coffee and settled in to watch the fireworks. By Monday, things started getting interesting. It began with email problems. Messages to federal contacts started bouncing back. Recipient unavailable. Delivery failed. Mailbox full. Then came the rejections. Sender unverified. Unverified facility. And my personal favorite, clearance contact not recognized. Do not reply on this channel. Landon told everyone it was probably just a computer glitch. He said it like someone who'd Googled email problems and thought turning it off and on again would fix everything. By lunch, their vendors stopped shipping stuff. Purchase orders just sat there. One supplier sent a polite message: "Until your status gets resolved, we're pausing all deliveries. Sorry for the trouble." Every word sounded like it went through 5 lawyers first. Meanwhile, Landon was wandering around the office like a lost tourist. "I'm still learning the ropes," he told finance. "This isn't really my area," he admitted to the contracts team. When someone asked about the verification forms for Project Falcon Ridge, he said, "That's on my week 2 list." The guy had no clearance, no training, and no idea the clock had already run out. Their clients started noticing too. A project manager who usually sent friendly emails switched to one-word answers. A phone call got cut short with "We'll talk next quarter." One government contact who always started messages with "Hey Chuck" sent a cold, "Confirm your FSO status immediately." The lawyers upstairs were sweating bullets. They tried reaching out to the Defense Industrial Base office. Nothing. Not even an auto reply. Just dead silence. When a company loses its clearance, the government doesn't make announcements. They just stop talking to you. Around 3 p.m., Monica from legal sent Austin an urgent message. FSO status, emergency. No response. She tried again, copying 3 board members. Still nothing. That's when the real damage showed up. A rejection notice hit their inbox like a freight train. Not polite, not gentle, just a big red stamp across a PDF. Incomplete submission, unverified FSO credentials. By 9 a.m. the next day, every executive had seen it. By 9:20 a.m., someone finally asked the right question. Who signed our last DD Form 254? Dead silence. Fingers stopped typing. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Landon looked like he wanted to disappear. I don't think I signed anything. I looked at some stuff. It's all kind of blurry. That's when the panic really started. Form DD 254 isn't some internal memo you can just skip. It's a federal document that authorizes handling classified information. It needs the signature of an approved facility security officer. No FSO, no signature, no contract. It's not a we'll fix it later problem. It's a you just committed a federal crime problem. Legal tried to salvage things. Okay, who's our current FSO then? Someone pulled up the official records. Complete silence. There was no current listing, no assigned officer, no valid authorization. Nothing since me. I wasn't just the last guy to do the job, I was the only one who'd ever been qualified for it at that level. And on the last paperwork, I was marked as the sole person responsible for continuity. They'd built everything around me. And now I was gone. In the legal conference room, someone's phone hit the table. Another person started whispering frantically into their headset, trying to figure out if the classified data they'd received 2 weeks ago was now considered a security breach. Landon looked like he wanted to crawl under his desk. I thought Chuck had transferred everything before he left. He did, one of the legal assistants snapped. Back. He filed the termination notice exactly like he was supposed to. You just didn't follow up on it. By mid-morning, Austin finally showed up. Red tie, dead eyes. Fix this, he growled at the room. That was his management style. Yell at problems until they went away. But you can't yell at paperwork. You can't intimidate federal regulations. And you definitely can't bluff your way through classified compliance violations. The phone started ringing. First call was from their main contractor asking for clarification on status. Second was from a military base requesting they confirm active FSO coverage to maintain access. Then came the call that really mattered. A federal program manager, cold as ice. Until verification is complete, consider your file under review. All access suspended. It happened on a Thursday morning so quiet you could hear the copier jamming 3 rooms away. 2 federal agents walked in like they owned the place. No drama, no badges flashing, just 2 guys in plain suits who made everyone stop talking just by being there. One carried a thin briefcase. The other walked with his hands loose, like someone who didn't need to worry about running anywhere. They checked in at the front desk with IDs that made the receptionist's voice crack when she called upstairs. "Legal's on the way," she squeaked into the phone. "And they want to see Mr. Kellerman." The agents didn't sit down. They just waited. 5 minutes later, they were in Austin's corner office with the door shut and the blinds closed. I wasn't there, obviously, but I knew exactly how it went down. I'd seen this movie before. Agent number 1 set his briefcase on the table like he was serving divorce papers. Then he took off his glasses, slow and deliberate. The kind of gesture that makes a room go cold. "The man whose security clearance holds your company's authorization," he said. "Where is he?" Austin blinked hard. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" "He was terminated last week. We had to restructure due to budget constraints. Someone from legal jumped in. We're currently in the process of transitioning responsibilities to..." The agent didn't even look at him, just opened his briefcase and slid a document across Austin's desk. "According to your own filings, this facility's charter is only valid under continuous supervision of the named facility security officer." He pointed to a line on the paper. "That name is Charles Fitzgerald, clearance ID 7842B. He let that sink in. No sound except the air conditioning and someone's career quietly dying. That oversight ended," the agent continued, "at 4:39 p.m. last Thursday. There was no successor designated, no continuity plan filed. As of that moment, your company has been operating without proper FSO coverage. Which means," Austin said, his voice cracking, "everything we've done since then is..." "Illegal," the second agent finished. including Project Falcon Ridge. You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you probably could have heard a feather hit the carpet. Project Falcon Ridge wasn't just any contract. It involved multiple agencies, classified infrastructure data, and audit requirements that could put people in federal prison. Submitting paperwork under fake credentials wasn't just breaking company policy. It was a federal crime. Austin tried to recover with corporate speak. We were under the impression that our interim compliance director had the necessary... Your interim director, the first agent said, checking another file, has no clearance whatsoever, no credentials, no federal authorization of any kind. The legal guy opened his mouth, then closed it. Austin stared at the papers like he could make the words change if he looked hard enough. But federal forms don't negotiate. They don't bend. And right then, Austin finally understood the size of the hole he'd dug. He hadn't just fired a compliance officer, he'd fired the keystone holding up the whole arch. And now, everything was coming down. By the next morning, the destruction was official. Not rumors or whispers. Hard facts on official letterhead. Project Falcon Ridge contract status, voided. It hit every executive's inbox like a death certificate. Red seal from the contracting office. Short and brutal. Lapse in FSO designation, misrepresentation of security oversight, non-compliance with clearance validation requirements, no appeals process, no second chances. Done. Attached underneath was notice number 2. Their satellite systems contract was also suspended. Because when you lose credibility with one federal agency, the others don't wait around to see what happens. They assume you're compromised and cut you off. Inside the building, it was complete chaos. Executives canceling meetings with flimsy excuses, legal running on no sleep and pure caffeine. Landon had disappeared entirely, left a resignation email with no punctuation and a smiley face emoji. Half the staff had switched their LinkedIn profiles to open to work. Then came the internal investigation. Board-mandated, independent, and absolutely ruthless. Everyone knew who'd started the domino effect, but now they needed someone to blame. Austin stood in front of the board of directors looking like he hadn't slept in a week. Wrinkled tie, bags under his eyes like luggage. He opened with his prepared excuse. Clearly, there was a breakdown in the transition process. Our former compliance officer may not have provided adequate notice of the implications of his departure. He was trying to make it sound like I'd sabotaged them on the way out, like I'd hidden critical information or set them up to fail. That's when Monica Sullivan from legal spoke up. Monica had never been my biggest fan, but she understood paperwork better than anyone. We reviewed all documentation, she said, cutting through Austin's BS. Mr. Fitzgerald filed his termination report exactly according to protocol. Form SF-328 was submitted within the required timeframe. He notified the contracting office, DHS, and the Defense Industrial Base. He couldn't designate a successor because no one else was qualified. Everything was done by the book. The room went dead quiet, the kind of quiet that happens when the truth cuts through all the excuses and politics. Austin looked down at his notes. He didn't argue back, couldn't argue. But the CFO leaned back in his chair and said just loud enough for the microphone to pick up. Our authorization was tied to his clearance. We can't bid on anything new until we rebuild from scratch. There it was, the sentence that took 10 years to build and 10 days to destroy. Rebuild from scratch meant starting over completely. New applications, new background checks, new compliance infrastructure. It meant losing every classified contract in their pipeline and probably being blacklisted from future opportunities. They'd turned off the lights and shot the only guy who knew where the circuit breaker was. And me? I was sitting at my kitchen table that evening, finishing leftover pizza and watching the news. I wasn't celebrating or gloating, just calm. The kind of calm you feel when you walk away from a burning building knowing you didn't start the fire, but you'd made sure all the exits were clearly marked. I hadn't sabotaged anything, hadn't leaked information, hadn't plotted revenge. I'd just stopped holding up the walls they didn't know were there. The company didn't collapse because of me. It collapsed because nobody else knew where the foundation was. 3 weeks after Austin's board meeting disaster, I got an email that made me smile for the first time since this whole mess started. Subject line, Senior Defense Compliance Position, Immediate Opening. The sender was Rockwell Defense Solutions, Alpine's biggest competitor, the company that had always come in second place on every major bid. Until now. I clicked the email open. They weren't just offering me a job, they were offering me exactly what I'd been doing at Alpine, with better pay, better benefits, and, this was the kicker, immediate start date because they urgently needed experienced FSO coverage for upcoming contract opportunities. Translation: they knew exactly what had happened to Alpine and they wanted the guy who'd built their compliance program before Austin blew it up. I didn't even have to think about it. I clicked accept interview and closed my laptop. 2 days later, I was sitting across from Janet Morrison, Rockwell's CEO, in a conference room that actually smelled like coffee instead of desperation. She was maybe 55, gray hair, no nonsense. Former Navy, according to the certificates on her wall. "Chuck," she said, looking at my resume, "I'm not going to dance around this. We know what happened at Alpine. Word travels fast in this business." I nodded. I figured it might. "Austin Kellerman called me personally last week," she continued. "Wanted to warn me that you might be disgruntled and could pose a security risk." She made air quotes around disgruntled. "Want to know what I told him?" "I'm curious." "I told him that any man who follows federal protocol exactly and files his paperwork correctly is exactly the kind of person I want handling my company's clearances." She closed the folder. "The job's yours if you want it, just like that. No negotiation, no background checks they didn't already have, no bureaucratic runaround." Janet knew what she was getting. "One question," I said. "What happened to your previous FSO?" She smiled. "Retired last month. Been looking for the right replacement for 6 weeks. Then Austin did us a favor and fired the best compliance officer in Colorado Springs. I started at Rockwell the following Monday. Clean office, functioning computers, and a staff that actually understood what the letters FSO meant. My first week, I processed 3 contract renewals that had been sitting in limbo and updated their facility clearance documentation that hadn't been touched in 2 years. It felt good to be useful again. Meanwhile, Alpine was still hemorrhaging contracts. Every week brought news of another canceled project or suspended relationship. The local defense industry newsletter, yeah, we actually have one, ran a story titled "When Compliance Goes Wrong, a Case Study." They didn't name Alpine directly, but everyone knew. Austin resigned on a Wednesday. The press release used all the usual phrases: pursuing other opportunities, transitioning leadership, grateful for his contributions. Corporate speak for, he got fired before he could destroy anything else. The company itself was officially under federal audit. Half the board had hired lawyers. The other half was pretending they'd raised concerns about compliance privately all along. I didn't waste time watching the fallout. I had work to do. About a month after I started at Rockwell, I got invited to speak at a defense industry panel, Compliance Best Practices in a Changing Environment. Normally I'd have passed. I'm not much of a public speaker, but something about the invitation felt right. The panel was virtual, of course, maybe 300 people logged in. Government folks, compliance officers, contract managers, people who understood the difference between following rules and just checking boxes. When it was my turn, I didn't talk about Alpine specifically, didn't need to. I talked about what it means to really understand compliance, how it's not about slowing down business, it's about protecting business. How proper procedures aren't obstacles to overcome, they're foundations to build on. I kept it simple. Rules aren't suggestions. Federal requirements aren't optional. And if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. When the panel ended, my email was full of messages. Other FSOs sharing their own stories. Defense contractors asking for consulting advice. One message just said, "Thank you for saying what needed to be said." I didn't feel vindicated or triumphant, just professional, like I'd done my job and people had noticed. 6 months later, Rockwell won the contract that Alpine had been building toward for 2 years, the same Project Falcon Ridge that had gotten Austin in so much trouble. Funny how things work out when you have proper FSO coverage and actually follow the rules. I didn't gloat about it, didn't send any told-you-so emails, just did the paperwork, processed the security requirements, and made sure everything was bulletproof from day one. Because that's what this was always about. Not revenge, not getting even, just consequences. Natural, predictable consequences that happen when you ignore the rules and fire the people who understand them. Austin had thought I was dead weight, background noise, just another name on the org chart that he could cut to improve his bottom line. What he never understood was that I wasn't decoration. I was infrastructure, and infrastructure only gets noticed when it's gone and everything starts falling apart. Alpine eventually found a new FSO and started rebuilding their compliance program. It took them 8 months and cost them 3 major contracts they couldn't bid on. Last I heard, they were slowly getting back into smaller projects, working their way back up to the kind of clearances they used to handle routinely. Good for them. I hope they learned something. As for me, I'm still at Rockwell, still processing forms, maintaining clearances, keeping federal agencies happy. Still doing the same job I've always done, just with people who understand why it matters. And every morning when I walk into that office, I remember what Janet Morrison told me during my interview. Any man who follows federal protocol exactly is exactly the kind of person I want. Turns out there are still companies that understand the difference between essential and expendable. They just weren't the company I used to work for.